What's up, Buttercup? Today we're going to do flat design part 2. Yesterday I gave you a little bit of an intro, and your homework was to go do some looking around the web, find some flat design sites you like so that you can recognize it. And a cool little side note, while I was at the ATM yesterday, I saw that even Wells Fargo has started to use flat design on their ATM interface. So it really is everywhere. It's kind of cool. So, there are a few things you need for today's tutorial. First thing you need is a working knowledge of Photoshop. I'm trying to keep these very short and simple, and I simply don't have time to teach you how to use Photoshop today. However, the next training I'm working on is a step-by-step design training. So if you're new to Photoshop and you're wanting to watch this but you know you can't follow along, that's totally cool. Just keep your eyes open for the training once I'm finished with it. Second thing you'll need is this large palette of flat design swatches. It's been very, very helpful for me, and I had to look all over the place for this darn site because I couldn't remember it. So I'm going to link to this website where you can download this Photoshop swatch palette, and it'll either be below this YouTube video description, or if you're looking at the blog post, it'll be right below this post. Otherwise, if you take a look at my screen, here is the URL. I'm not going to keep it up here long enough for you to type it all in, but you can feel free to pause the video, type this in, and go there. And basically this is an ACO file, which is a Photoshop swatch library. And I'm going to show you how to install that. So by now I assume you have it downloaded, and in your downloads folder it should look something like this. It should say flat UI, have a little graphic like that, and it should be an ACO file. Here's what you need to do. You need to go to your computer. And by the way, this is for PC users. I don't know how to do this on a Mac. It's probably pretty similar. Go to your main hard drive. Then go to your C drive. If you're on a 64-bit processor, you'll go to Program Files 86. Otherwise, Program Files if you don't have Program Files times 86. Then you're going to go to Adobe, and then Photoshop, and then Presets. And then you're going to look for color swatches. And you're going to just copy and paste that file into this folder. And that'll add it to your Adobe Color Swatches presets. And so now if we pull up Photoshop, if you go to Window, and then go to Swatches, you should see something like this over here, where it's like the Swatches palette. And if you click the little drop-down menu, you should see Flat UI in your list. If you don't, you might have to restart Photoshop. You can also click Load Swatches, or you can just double-click the file, and it'll load those swatches up in Photoshop. And the reason I really like this palette is it's very extensive. That one that I showed you yesterday was a great starting point. It had like 12 colors, but this one has a lot of colors. And it gives you a very good foundation without you having to tweak and find the right color yourself. Last thing you're going to need to download is the Lato Font. I mentioned it's a Google Web font, but you're going to need to download it to see what it'll look like. So if you just go to Google and go to Lato Font Download, you can see that it's on Font Squirrel. Great website for free fonts. So just go here, download it, and then once it's downloaded, install it, then pull Photoshop up, and you'll be good to go. I'm going to create a new document. I like to do things at about 950 by 650 at first, then add guides to the edges of the 950. Oops. Sounds like the traffic outside's having a fun time today. Then I make the canvas size after putting those guides there like 1350 or something. And I'll make it a bit taller too. Cool, let me fill in this background. So I'm a big fan of using custom shapes because you keep everything vector and it's very easy to edit. So I just grab my rectangle tool and then I block in my basic things. Being that we're going to have this being scrolled a lot, I'm going to make the canvas a lot taller. Oops. Sorry that I keep having to fill in my background. Okay, so, and we did a little bit of this yesterday, I'm aware of that. But the first thing we're going to do today, I'm going to drag in a header. And it depends on your preference how you want to do it, but what I really like about the flat design approach is doing white text on a light colored background. And what's so nice about these swatches is that they're kind of created with that in mind. So most of these they're light enough that they're light, but they're dark enough that white text is indeed legible on them, especially if you have a lot of negative space. So if I do like Zach Swinehart, let's say, and let's say I want to make Swinehart be a little bit offset, make it light. That's what I've been doing recently for my logo. And instead of making it white, and you saw this a little bit yesterday, I usually like to go for kind of a slight off-white. So maybe something like this. I think often looks a little bit better. Now at this size, I see that it's a little bit hard to read, so I'm going to try bumping it to 60. That's a little bit too big. So I'm going to change out this background swatch, I think. I'm going to give it a bit more negative space, though. Because the real goal with flat design isn't, like, in the past, the goal is to get everything important above the fold. Well, flat design, the thing that's important is making your site exciting enough above the fold that people want to keep scrolling down. So keeping it very light on content, very fun, very, I guess, cool to look around and encouraging people to scroll is really what it's about. See, that pops a heck of a lot better than the other one. So yeah, that's kind of the first step, is to find something that looks good. I like the Lato font a lot, especially as far as Google Web Fonts go, because there aren't usually that many that I actually like. So one thing we're going to do for buttons, that same place that had that cool like 12 color palette that I showed you yesterday also has this flat UI kit that comes with a lot of nice little icons and just general things. Like this video player probably looks familiar to you from my emails. So it gives you a lot of elements that are very useful for the design. So if you go to just Google and search for flat UI kit, oops, it should be the first one. Otherwise, you can buy an icon kit or design your own icons, whatever you want to do. But the key thing is that if you know what your call to action is, so with my new Zach Swinehart site, which I can pull up in a second, my key call to action is that I want people to go check out my trainings, because you know me, I love creating trainings, and long term, this is what I want to do all the time. So I want to make that icon big. So what I did is I just dragged out a big circle. Shows a color that I liked for it. And then I drew in an icon for the monitor, which I don't remember if I have it as an actual custom shape or if I grabbed it from something else. But basically, everything with flat design, as you're seeing so far, is just about keeping things simple, keeping things clean. So if you wanted to have a puzzle piece icon, you could do something like this. And we could get some text in there that says like puzzles or something like that. I think that was kind of cool. I don't think I would use the Photoshop default puzzles icon. But again, it's about a lot of negative space. And if we look at the different examples, some of the cool ones, like I pulled up the Wistia site yesterday, that's a good one, or Xbox even has one now for their Xbox One. I saw that the other day. If you'll notice, Xbox has adapted it for their logo, for this whole thing, and it's paneled a lot of the time. And by paneled, I mean that you've got one panel here, another panel here, another panel here. So let's click on Xbox One and I'll show you an example. So see, it encourages you to scroll. Here's a green panel, here's a white panel, here's a gray panel, here's a white panel, here's a gray panel, here's a black panel. It's all these different panels with content that is like big graphic and text. So similarly, if we have this green panel first, and then we were to create kind of a white panel or an off-white panel with some of the key offerings that we have, and then we created another panel next where we show maybe our core product or a testimonial or something like that. So let's maybe make this one a, I don't really like that red. Purple's cool. Everyone likes purple. Here's blue. So let's say we have a big panel like that, and then we had some text that was like, one thing I've noticed, so I laid out some text for a testimonial. One thing I've noticed a lot as I've been messing with flat design is that a lot of the time, if you have big-ass fonts, it's almost harder to read than if you have a smaller font that's more spaced out. So like, do you think this is easier to read or this? And so that's something to think about, is that bigger is not always the answer. Sometimes it's just about keeping the negative space and keeping it easy for people to read graphically. So I think that looks kind of nice. And then if I go to Google and I search for like trying to think of a good way to lay it out. In the past, I would probably have put like an outer glow on this to make it pop out a little bit from it, which I might still do, but it kind of does go a little bit against the whole flat design feel. However, just having it there doesn't quite work for me either. What I might end up doing is putting like a slight stroke on it that's like the darker blue that I used for that font, and just have it be very obvious that it's there, something like that. Or I might bind it to a layer that is a circle, which I think could look kind of cool. So if I drew a circle that was approximately as large as the dude's head, something like that, I can put it below that layer, hold Alt, and click to bind them together. So I think that actually looks really nice. So that, at long last, is what I would do to make it look nice. I might put a stroke on it if I think it's necessary. Oops. I think it could look nice with a stroke. So if I were to put this here, and take this text and put it here. Anyway, so this would be a cool way to revolve through different testimonials. Let me pull up my guides and see how I'm doing on my border. Because I like to keep everything inside the 950 pixel fold, or not fold, but width. It's not 100% necessary, because we're generally going to build these sites to be responsive, but it's certainly a good practice to keep in mind. And so up here we have a few of our key calls to action. Then here's like a testimonial, and then maybe down here we have kind of like a light gray panel that's a little bit lighter than our normal off-white, but in it we could maybe showcase some of the product features. And then maybe there's another one right after it that's like the whitish, like quite white. Quite white. And so it could just be feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, feature 4, that sort of thing. So I know that this is the kind of thing where it's hard to really get into step-by-step stuff in a short video. The main thing I wanted to show you today is kind of my process as I do this stuff. And a lot of it is me just knowing these fundamentals, which is panel design and flat design go together very well. So it's often that with flat design you're going to see panel design. And then, knowing those fundamentals and knowing that you have a good color palette to work off of. And it's not like you always have to use swatches. You saw when choosing the border in this darker text that I'm just kind of choosing this background color, making it darker. Knowing these things, having that fundamental knowledge, and then just experimenting. I'm very stoked with the way this picture looks right now. And at first, I was growing fearful that I was not going to find a way to make it look good. But I think that looks very cool, especially if it was just rotating between them right here with a nice jQuery slider. So, to conclude, I guess, the little tutorial today, get comfortable using these palettes, get comfortable with blocking in colors, and keep working at it, and keep me in the loop with how it goes. See ya.